Everyone is vulnerable to being pinned when life plays hardball, whether it is a physical or mental health condition. No one can stand alone. For those who are not pinned, appreciate that it could be you or loved one someday. So when you see a chance to help someone, please do. They are not weak, they are pinned. Even a slight hand up and a listening ear can begin seriously lightening the load, change, or save a life. Help end stigma. Move from being pinned to purpose. Time for a hand up.
Hello, everyone. It's Jeff Moore. I'm the founder of the Pin to Purpose podcast, and it's my great pleasure today to have as our guest Ted Perkins. And in a moment, I'll be telling you a bit more about Ted's background. But before I start, I'd just like to mention that the Pin to Purpose podcast was launched to help to shatter stigma, to give people a hand up on their healing journeys, and to have conversations about mental health and well-being. So actually, even before I say a few words, Ted, I didn't double check with you, but where are you calling in from today?
Los Angeles.
In LA. Okay, fantastic. So we've been having guests from all around the world, and you're our first guest from Los Angeles.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I represent.
So, absolutely. So I will I'll just read to you a bit of Ted's background, and then I'll pass it over to him to introduce himself further. So Ted is a successful screenwriter and producer. He's written and sold multiple feature films and television series for the US and Latinx markets, including Nothing Like the Holidays, Compadres, and the Televisa Univision series American Dream. He's also the owner of Eclectic TV Sales and Recovery TV, producing bilingual broadcast and digital content from his studios in Los Angeles. Perkins is the founder of Recovery Movie Meetups, a community-driven platform that uses film and guided conversation to support addiction recovery, mental health awareness, and connection, bringing the power of storytelling to healing and engagement. So Ted, great to have you, and I'll pass it over to you if you wanted to say a few more introductory words for the audience.
Well, thanks. No, I think it's really cool to have organizations like yours and media that talk about the fact that, you know, addiction and mental health are very common issues. A lot of people don't like to talk about them. A lot of people think it's stigmatizing. A lot of people want to remain anonymous and deal with their pain alone, especially men. I've found sort of like a niche in the whole addiction and recovery space and mental health space that uses movies and media as a way to sort of start conversations with people. I think that there's something that a lot of people don't really talk about, but there's sort of like not a systemic failure, but sort of like a conceptual failure of how treatment is given in rehabs and in one-on-one therapy and group therapy around the world. And I think the default situation has always been, the default preference has been sort of talk therapy. And it works, you know, psychotherapy definitely works. It's very solid foundations. But my whole premise is that people are visual learners, and people, when they're creating their view of themselves in the world, their reality, and how they interact with people and with the decisions that they make. You know, the idea of rational emotive behavioral therapy, that your thoughts influence your beliefs, and then your beliefs influence your behaviors. You know, thoughts are largely visual. Everybody is sort of creating thought experiments in their heads. Like, well, if I do this, will that happen? If I take these drugs, will that happen? Can I get away with drinking tonight? Am I really crazy or not? Are people just telling me that I have a problem and I shouldn't take my medications? Everybody's creating these realities, many of them false. And I think by meeting people where they are in the visual cortex, we've made a lot of progress with Recovery Movie Meetups, and very soon with Renewal, to use people's vicarious learning ability of looking at content movies, which are sort of renditions of thought experiments played out, in high definition in 4K. That's what movies are. That's what TV is. They're renditions. They're thought experiments that are played out, beautifully produced, etc. But they are thought experiments that have been written by people that are conducting thought experiments to say, what would it look like if this character said this and this happened and they shot this person and then the world blew up? Let's commit that to paper and see how it looks on screen. And they're doing that to elicit an emotional response from people. And so I think that the idea that talk therapy is the only way to get through to people is not true. I think experiential therapies can go a really long way. A lot of people have started using music. A lot of people use meditation and other sort of forms of equine therapy. We've carved out the sort of media, TV, and film niche for that. And so we're the largest provider of curriculums based around using movies and media as ways to move the needle in mental health and addiction treatment worldwide.
No, it's incredible. And if you can share a bit more, so you have the deep experience, and as in film that I described at the outset in terms of your background and obviously your own journey to get there. So combining them, but how did you decide to really dive in to this thematic, given your experiences and those of others around you?
Well, I think working in the film industry, I worked at Universal and Warner Brothers, and I developed a lot of scripts. I taught screenwriting across the country, around the world. I developed hundreds of projects. I helped other people develop their projects. So I think over time, I've gotten a very good sense of what makes a good story and how to craft stories and organize information in a way that's accessible to people and can make a difference. And so I think and then by doing that, you're always, it's very dialectical in the sense that like every scene in every movie that I've ever written, for every script I've ever written, had an ulterior motive to sort of telegraph some concept or theme or overarching concern. It's never just about the scene or the characters or what they're saying. I mean, maybe in a Marvel movie, flying through space doesn't really have much of a transcendent thematic value. But in most movies with conflict and character development, et cetera, the idea is to develop broader things and convey them to the audience in a way that doesn't feel like you're hitting them over the head. Like you must, think about existential problems by watching this scene. Or even worse is like dialogue, which is very intentionally trying to steer you in one political direction or another, or one thematic direction or another. And so I've always been able to break down movies as to like what each scene means, both in writing them and then also looking at them when other people have written them or developed them in the movies. And then also in the movies and TV shows themselves, like breaking down what is the value of the scene and what can it teach people? What are the filmmakers trying to do, either directly or inadvertently, or what can the audience glean out of these scenes? And so I sort of parlayed that dialectical analysis, content analysis, into looking at all these movies about addiction and recovery and mental health, and curating them, and then opening up discussions and creating worksheets around them by my ability or just my practice, and looking at what scenes mean and what they could evoke, and sort of what are some of the things that the scene could be telling somebody who's watching it. Is it through identification with the character? Is it through them understanding that there's a bigger purpose outside of just their own responsibility for their own recovery, that their decisions impact other people around them? So there's a lot of really deep, almost Shakespearean stuff in in most movies. In all of the movies in our program, they've been selected specifically because they talk about some serious stuff. A lot of times, most people don't really understand or don't really realize some of the stuff that's being talked about. They just think it's entertainment. But we've taken it to a point where, something which on the surface seems to be entertaining can be seen as a really powerful documentation of some higher idea or theme that can invite scrutiny and self-evaluation amongst the people that see it. And I think this is especially true for people who are in early recovery or in mental health who might be watching a movie and say, all right, well, this is a way to sort of like, give me 2 hours and get me out of their hair for 2 hours. But we've turned that around into highly therapeutic 2-hour sessions with discussions afterwards that lead to people having transformative moments that lead to actual change and measurable results and improvements to their lives. So that's what I'm in it for. And ironically, my whole experience in the film industry really didn't prepare me for this at all. The only preparation it gave me was the fact that it gave me a phenomenal addiction to alcohol over time, because I was always whining and dining and going to parties, and that was part of the Hollywood life. First class travel everywhere, the yacht at Cannes, cocktails, champagne all the time, buying cocktails for friends, hosting dinner parties, all that stuff. That was the only training that it gave me for this. Was it gave me the problem that I needed to address in myself, which then I addressed by watching movies. And so to get sober from alcohol use disorder, I watched 100 movies in 100 days, and it worked so well that I actually ended up writing this book called Addicted in Film: Movies We Love About the Habits We Hate. And it didn't become a national bestseller, but a lot of people really liked it, and a lot of people bought it, and a lot of people called me and said, we're using it in mutual support meetings. Why don't you turn it into a program? So that's what I did. That was the genesis of Recovery Movie Meetups. Was how I've helped myself is now being turned into a different way, an additional way to help others. Not the only way to help others. I'm just part of a toolkit.
Yep.
Movies
Fantastic.
are part of a toolkit.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to put the link to that book on the follow-up to this on our YouTube channel. But I'd like to, the reason for this podcast is to give people different thoughts, different resources, different ways to approach their mental health challenges, and in this case, addiction. So can you explain a bit more for viewers who are watching how they could engage in this? How can they, the different meetups and watching the films?
Sure.
How does that work?
Well, yeah, it's not just addiction, although that's a large part of our clientele. Another big part of our clientele is mental health treatment facilities, and most of our clients who treat addiction are also a lot of addiction issues have underlying mental health components, what are called co-occurring disorders or dual diagnosis patients. So they end up licensing both of our programs, and there's movies for both. So, like for instance, in the case of, let's say one of the movies in our program is 28 Days. That's a really entertaining, fun. There's moments of comedy and levity, and there's moments of high drama. With a great movie star in Sandra Bullock, written by Susanna Grant, who's a phenomenal screenwriter who wrote several Oscar-winning movies, including I can't remember the name now. But the essence of that movie is that somebody goes into treatment and they don't really take it seriously, and they try to bend the rules, and they don't really think that they belong there and they're special, and they don't really want to share when they're in meetings, and they can't wait to get out and go back to their life. And their boyfriend is telling them, hey, when you get out, it's going to be great. We can go back to our partying ways. And he even slips her a bottle of Vicodin, like, here's something to take the edge off while you're in there. I mean, like, no understanding of the severity of the problem. But then over the course of the movie, she begins to understand and accept this, and then goes through a heroic transformation into the kind of person that she really wishes that she could have been and always wanted to be, but was being stopped by alcohol. And so anybody who's seen the movie knows it's very entertaining. But on a deeper level, this is a movie that's shown a lot in treatment facilities that have just licensed our program. It's the first movie that they watch, because there is a large majority of people who go to treatment. It's maybe their first time at rehab. They are not taking it seriously at all. They're just there for a court order, or because their family forced them, or there was an intervention, or they're on leave from work and they have to do it. They're checking a box. They might not say it, but they're secretly thinking, this doesn't really apply to me. When I get out, I'll be fine. And look at the relapse rates of people who leave treatment after 30 days. There's a high percentage of people who just go to a bar or go to their drug dealer right after they get out and go right back. And it's almost like they've complied with a regulation that they had to comply with, but they had no real deep connection to the actual work itself. They were phoning it in. So the movie shows that phoning it in is not a great idea. And so when they watch that, and also the movie Clean and Sober is another example of that. When they watch those movies at the beginning, it sort of like really instills the message that you're here because you're just like everybody else who has this issue. You're not special. The rules of addiction and recovery are not going to be bent just for you. You're not better or worse than any of the people in this treatment facility. And we're here to help you. And if you take it seriously, you can make some gains. And if you don't, then, well, that's on you. But, we can't really guarantee any results. And unfortunately, your odds of survival on the outside get lower and lower as you progress in your addiction, as we all know. So that's an important film. Now, the next stage is that, if you're showing people who already accept the fact that their addiction is severe, but they need a way to reinforce that in a way that's helpful. There's a lot of movies in our program, Leaving Las Vegas and many others that show really stark consequences of continued use behavior in alcohol and drugs. And it's cautionary in a way. We don't show these movies to scare the living crap out of people, but scaring somebody is a motivation to get them to change their mind about something. Shaming somebody is a way to save them, help them. Inspiring them is a much better way. And there are movies that do that. Because what we do is, our premise is that there are several different ways to change a person's mind. One is to identify with what's going on. One is accept the consequences of what's happening. 3 is owning up to the problem. 4 is understanding the consequences and be scared by them and understanding them. 5th is like being ashamed of what has happened and wanting to rectify the relationships in their life. The 5th is fear, the fear of what might happen if they continue with their addictive behaviors. And then to be inspired by great stories in our program that show people who have succeeded. And then on commercial on the mental health side, there's movies about anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder that show, how there's a friction between somebody who needs to take their medications for bipolar disorder, but then also feeling that their emotions have become flattened. And how do they figure that out? How do they understand that they may not have chosen to have a disease, like a mental health disease like schizophrenia, they are responsible for it and how they conduct themselves. And that includes going to treatment, understanding treatment, talking to people, opening up, taking medications if they've been prescribed. If they're not working, taking other medications. And also, since a lot of the movies in our program deal with multiple different diagnoses, it's also a chance for people in our meetings to understand what other people are going through. Because in a typical mental health treatment facility, you might have somebody who's just really, really super, super depressed for whatever reason. And you might have somebody who's in a mania of bipolar disorder, manic depressive disorder, and they might be in a manic phase. You might have somebody who's a schizophrenic. You might have somebody who's just a garden variety person who's very anxious or has social anxiety disorder, or even an eating disorder combined with other issues. All of those collectively all feed off each other. And so for people to be in these meetings and watch movies about all of these different afflictions and problems, it gives them an open view of what other people are going through. And it relates directly to what they're going through as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it really does help people understand things better and realize that they're not alone. They're not unique. They're not cursed. Mental health is what everybody deals with. They're just the lucky ones that happen to be in treatment to help themselves. Mm-hmm. In professional treatment, while there's 90% of the world that's out there suffering in silence, about to make bad decisions, ruining their lives, or losing all their money, or potentially hurting other people and themselves, or worse, potentially suicidal ideation or killing themselves. So our movies really are intended to cover a broad range of issues, both in a prevention sort of mode, both in a treatment mode and an aftercare mode, and a personal introspection mode that I think has long-term ramifications, because it's not just about completing treatment, it's about learning about yourself. I mean, Socrates said, know thyself. Jung said the greatest privilege that a man or a woman can have is to like really understand themselves deeply through the process of individuation. And really what this is, this is movie assisted individuation. If you follow the Jungian point of view, is it like really getting in touch with what matters, who you are, who you really want to be, what drives you. And of course, that also dovetails into the RABT hierarchy of values and Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the stages of changes model. We've sort of matched up Stoicism, existentialism, Jungian philosophy, and logotherapy into one big, beautiful series of programs and movie exercises that people are using to get better. And that's, just absolutely delightful as far as I'm concerned. I can't think of a better use of my time on this planet right now than trying to help other people that have passed through similar circumstances as I have. Many with far, far bigger issues and bigger problems. I got off pretty lightly. I mean, look where I live. I'm very grateful for everything that I have. I didn't lose everything I was about to.
Right.
And so I think it's really nice to be able to sort of make my little dent in the universe in the mental health and addiction treatment area.
Huge. And I was so glad to meet you because this was new to me in terms of all of the films and that angle. I'm trying to, as you say, like bring forward different stories that can help people right now that are out there that are challenged, or other caregivers and organizations that are doing things. So I think your initiative is huge. I didn't realize that there were so many films on all of these topics either. And I wanted to ask you, going forward, what you see. Like, do you see that the more people are willing to open up a bit, I guess, and also talk about mental health and look at these issues as hopefully, in my own piece of the puzzle, I refer to it as being, people aren't weak, but they may be in a weakened state. And that's the bench press analogy. At any given time, it's not a permanent thing, but if they're in a weakened state, they may need the hand up. And your films, I think, are a huge example of that in so many ways. But going back to my question, how is this field developing, and how do you see, the films that will be made in the next few years kind of evolving even further in terms of different stories and different ways that people can reflect on their healing journeys?
That's a good question. I can't really predict where Hollywood is going, but I do have an opinion. In the past, I think, like, for instance, let's observe what will happen at the Academy Awards this year. I predict that Hamnet will win Best Picture. And for us, that's wonderful because, not commercial, there's no special effects, nobody's flying around in a cape, et cetera. Hasn't made $1 billion at the box office. But in terms of like how Recovery Movie Meetups and Renewal would see that is a movie about trauma, about mental health, about anguish, about grief. And that is a movie that will totally be in our program. And we're going to have a interview with Claudia Black, who's written extensively about trauma, sort of like the go-to author and expert on trauma. She's going to do a review with me, a breakdown of the movie, right before it wins Best Picture. Hope it wins Best Picture, so that'll make our content even more compelling. But that's my prediction. And somebody said something, and I can't remember who, and it is true. I think every movie, in a sense, is a movie about addiction and mental health. Every movie. I mean, you could make the argument. Now, not necessarily people using drugs and alcohol or having bipolar disorders or going crazy or anything, but the essential breakdown of a good movie, if there are good movies being made anymore, is that there's a hero with a character flaw who is addicted to normalcy but realizes that that's unsustainable anymore. And they have to be heroic and change the world. That's the 3-act structure of the hero's journey, the Joseph Campbell model.
Yes.
And then on the mental health side, as well, there are people who are experiencing grief. Drama movies, romantic comedies, these are all things about people grappling with emotions and having cognitive biases influence what they believe. And that cognitive biases and seeing the world for what it is versus how you want it to be, the way that Chekhov said, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. Those are all mental health issues. They're mental health topics, not necessarily mental health diagnosis or like bipolar disorder, but the ideas of being addicted to normalcy, of being stuck in a place, of being not open to different points of view, or not really having self-evaluation of your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and what your reality is and how you interact with other people. Every good movie has that. Most dramas will have that. And I think in the future where generative AI can create these wonderful worlds and design these incredible science fiction fantasies and action movies and things like that, I think there will be a lot of people who enter that space and make really big movies. But I think the one thing that people will miss or want more of or want to retain as a movie-going audience is that connection to the emotional aspects of movies, characters, identification, understanding the weakness that characters have, and you want them to win in the end. That's something that really can't be necessarily generated by generative AI in any meaningful way. So I think people will still want to see people. And I think it might open up really greater opportunities for movies about addiction recovery, mental health, and other heavier topics that were considered heavy will now be more mainstream and more opened up, and more people will see them. And hopefully with using our programs and anything else, they'll see that these movies can be very curative, very inspirational. And instead of just seeing, Hamnet as a movie that you buy popcorn to see and like you cry at the end, to really have the tools dialectically to really think about that in a deeper way and how it can affect and change your life. I mean, Hamnet is just a movie, like any movie is just a movie, but any movie could literally change somebody's life.
Yes.
And that's why one of my favorite movies really is Inception, because it takes that to an extreme where you change somebody's mind while they're in your dreams, and some fundamental thing about what they believe while they're dreaming. And then when they wake up, their life is completely changed as a result. And the world is completely changed as a result. I think that's a profound metaphor. And that's what we're really trying to drive at. That, it might be fluffy entertainment to some person, but I hear all the time from our clients that the scene in this movie, XYZ, totally blew me away. And now I'm going to go do this. Or now I see myself like that. That's pretty cool.
Oh, it's amazing. Well, I'll say one last thing, and then I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so I'll pass it back to you for any other thoughts you'd like to share with our audience. But I was invited actually to write a book chapter recently in a sustainable finance book, but I was looking at the history of innovation, and there's a concept that runs through a lot of historical innovation called the adjacent possible. And it's when, you're close to an idea. It's just you haven't connected them before. So in that sense, it's like opening a door. So I'm just thinking of what you're saying, the new ideas you bring forward in your films, something that is an epiphany for someone or really inspires them. And then, it sets them off in a new direction. And hopefully, in the concept of pin to purpose, the purpose idea is, focusing on, again, what is of true meaning to people and helping them along their healing journey. So I know we only have a couple of minutes left, Ted, but
I just sent an email saying I'm going to be 5 minutes late. So
okay. So, so we have a few more minutes then, but I'm sure we could go on a lot longer if we had the time, but it's great to hear what you're doing, and congratulations to you. And
well, thanks. I'd like to talk a little bit while I have the microphone. I think everything that I've spoken about up to now is also leading in my next business venture with my partner, Mark Rappaport, who's the president-elect of the American Psychiatric Association and a renowned psychiatrist and a leading expert in mental health, worked at Cedars-Sinai and Geffen School, et cetera, and was the founding chairman of the Huntsman Mental Health Institute. And we both have sort of agreed that having a streaming platform that integrates and aggregates all the content that we could possibly find that accomplishes all of the things that you and I have been speaking about for the last 40 minutes would be a really great resource. And so we're in the middle of putting that together. And when we launch that later this year, we're calling it the Netflix of addiction and mental health. And I think if people see it as easy and low cost and as convenient, that can be seen anywhere, you never know. There might be some person who's really depressed and really wants to jump off a building, and they just click on the app and they watch a couple of movies about people who've overcome that problem, or maybe they're anxious, or maybe they're dealing with triggers or urges or whatever it is. There's going to be content for every person, and even content for teenagers and young adults who have still not solidified their plans to become addicted to tools.
Huge.
And could watch this content and be like, inspired to not make decisions that they see conveyed on screen. So I think it could have some powerful implications, and I think it's going to be wonderful to see how it evolves and changes the media landscape. Because to me, there's a lot of streaming apps that cater to special interests, yoga, mindfulness. Hey, my dog is having a nightmare right now.
Does he have something he wants to tell us?
No, he's having a nightmare. So he's fighting with somebody in his dreams. He's having a thought experiment. And I think that it'll be very interesting to see, where this goes and who it can help. So
that's tremendous. And if people want to follow that, do you have a name yet, or that's to be?
Yeah, it's Renewal. It's www.watchrenewal.com.
Oh, it is the Renewal. Okay, I got it. Yeah.
Watchrenewal.com. And I think I think when you think about the fact that as a special interest, there are something like in the neighborhood of 80 million people in the United States, just the United States, that are going, need to go to some form of mental health or addiction treatment at any given time, or allied. Where's their special interest streaming platform? We
absolutely
created it. It seemed counterintuitive. Like, well, why would somebody? That's not a special interest. That's a bad special interest. And our thing is like, no, it's actually everybody's special interest because it touches everybody's lives.
Yes. That's right. No, wonderful. Well, I really appreciate again that you came on as a guest. I hope lots of people will watch this. We've been having, good momentum. I think we've had a little over 20 podcasts and maybe about 45,000 views. So it is, we're getting there. It's getting some views. Thank you. And I hope people will reach out to you, go to your website and, look into what you're doing, because it sounds fantastic. I don't remember when I was also hospitalized for 5.5 weeks. I don't remember watching a single film. And, there was all types of people with different situations on the floor.
Uh-huh.
But I think that this would have been very helpful for people, among the broader applications that you are bringing it out to the world for.
We agree. And that goes to the point that I started to make at the beginning, that everything is, the default situation is talk therapy and, silence and introspection. All of those things are great. But unfortunately, I think treatment has been viewed as something which is almost like a punishment. Mm-hmm. It has to be boring. It has to be sterile. Yeah. It has to be clinical. It has to be technical. If you put on a movie, that's too much fun. That's actually, it's not serious enough. 12-step meetings, SMART meetings are all very technical. And a lot of people go to mutual support meetings, and our programs are all based on mutual support, people getting together. And a lot of people in a lot of millions of meetings around the world all the time are doing the same sort of meeting format, where they feel like they have to be there for their own health, and that's good. They might get something out of it, but are they ever entertained or really engaged with it? Not so much. So that's our little contribution to sort of create a little module where people can just engage in a lighter way, and maybe you have scenes where you laugh at,
absolutely,
the stuff that you're going through. I don't think there's anything more curative than that.
I agree with you 1,000%. It kind of lightens the load. I had a chance to meet with an improv coach at a conference recently who I'd like to have on this podcast, because at the end of the day, we are all human. Sometimes, you can look back at these situations and realize this is not all about being serious. It's about trying to enjoy our lives again.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, I'm glad you see it that way. And I really appreciate you making me part of your digital ecosystem. And to all of you people who are watching this, I hope you're well. Be happy. Create your reality positively every day by breaking down your beliefs and understanding that they're not immutable. As Ben Franklin said, most people are about as happy as they choose to be. Those are my last words of wisdom, as it were.
Right.
There are days when I find it hard to follow my own advice. I get it.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Ted. Great to talk to you, and all the best, and look forward to keeping in touch.
You bet. Cheerio.
See ya.